This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references provided if you need support.
Welcome back to Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I'm Ashley.
I'm Sara Cate.
Today we are sort of not hitting the brakes, but we're just going to visit episode 0, which was Imposter Syndrome. So if you haven't listened to that episode, it's technically the first episode we put out. It's episode 0 that we did literally the day of launch.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here because last week was episode 10. And we both kind of had a oh, fuck, that was episode 10.
10 whole episodes.
It seems like a big, I don't know, marker.
Yeah.
It's just a big thing. It was episode 10. And so for 10 whole weeks, we have put ourselves out there. And we had a lot of imposter syndrome before we launched this. I think we have always known deep in our hearts that what we're putting out is stuff that we want to put out, but that doesn't take away the fear of being seen or the fear of criticism or fear of success, like fear of it all. And there have been some instances along the way where we both, up until episode 10, where we both have been like, no, I'm out. Like, shit.
That was like, and it was like that my high-pitched squealer voice where I was like, that's when I know I'm in a moment of some internal conflict.
Yeah. So we want to talk about that, because I think especially if you're in a space where, whether it's for a living that you put yourself out there, like maybe you are an entrepreneur and you're putting yourself out there. One of the things we just talked about was using that as an example of career as an example. When you work for somebody else and if you're responsible for marketing somebody else, it's so easy to be in that role of marketing this other person, because it's not you, right? You're not the business. But then when it is yourself and it is your stuff and this is our voice coming through, and it's we both have had very significant moments of does my voice, do we deserve, are we worthy of our voice being heard? And that
does it even matter?
Yeah. And that's a really hard, my stomach hurts just thinking about it, because it's a really, really, really hard place to be. And I think we would be lying, or anybody would be lying, if they have said that they've never felt it.
Well, and I think Ashley and I really strive with this to be ourselves the most authentically that we can be. We don't, kind of like we said in the first episode, in episode 0, it was, there's not a whole lot of bells and whistles on this thing. We don't have an entry song at this point. We don't have a special recording gear, and but we knew we wanted this information to be out there. And so everything, and even with what we talk about, we are we cannot censor ourselves. We're not going to sugarcoat things. We're not going to pretend things don't impact us, or, at some point, I'm sure a criticism will come in, and, my hope is that we would bring it here and have a conversation about it, and not shy away from oh, I have to protect myself and my ego in this, or we can't let anybody see the cracks. We are willing to show the cracks. We are willing to show the fears and the insecurities, because if we weren't authentically naming those things and in those spaces, this wouldn't have the what's the word I'm looking for? The impact that we hope it will have, is if you come here and you take your time to listen to us talk and hear our voices, that you would believe and trust, hopefully, that what we were saying was coming from a really real, honest place. And so to not have this conversation and not say, even after we launched and we're at 10 episodes in, which is incredible, that we would be lying. We would be dishonest if we said, hey, there haven't been still moments where it's crickets and maybe some external orienting to hey, we're not really hearing all of the things we want to hear. Or Ashley was hearing these some feedback and I wasn't hearing any. And so I was like, well, are we even out there? Are we even doing this? And me putting pressure and putting expectation on that, and that it has to have this impact. And I'm like, whoa, really? And Ashley dialed me right back in, so we want to talk about the ways that things have come up for us in this to speak about the reality of sharing yourself, because it doesn't have to be a business. It doesn't, this could be in relationship. This could be in being a parent. This could be in the role that you're in working for somebody else, because, you have gifts and they're going to be uniquely you in the role that you're in. And so how do we get comfortable really stepping into who we are and our voice, and also allowing for the fear that tries to derail it, and allowing for, the truth, which is like being exposed, sharing and opening your heart, yourself. It is terrifying. And it's terrifying because we've all lived a lot of stuff. And, how I think too, we gather the right people around us. To help reflect in those moments. Because if I hadn't had Ashley, I would have head in the sand. Right down in there. Just, there she goes. She's out. She gone. So it just, it matters who is in your circle and who's reflecting to you as well in this. We're not meant to do this alone. So
so let's maybe talk a little bit about, because you mentioned ego. So let's maybe just spend a little bit of time on somebody who's maybe not familiar in referring to the ego the way that we are referring to it. Because I think it's an important concept, and it's an important distinction to make of who your ego is, because it's not you. It's somebody sitting on your shoulder over here telling you to stay safe. It's your ego is the one that tells you that you shouldn't really do that, because you should be pretending to be somebody else, or you should put their needs before yours, right? Because that's how you become likable, and that's how you stay in relationship with people. So your ego is kind of this false presentation of what your maybe subconscious thinks that you should be doing.
It's like a brake pedal almost, too, of your authenticity.
Yes. Oh, that's great. A brake pedal.
Just in case you needed a sound effect for brakes. And also, if your brakes sound like that, you might have a problem. But anyways, yes. Brake pedal for your authenticity.
Yeah. Really. And it is the ego that is never going to go away, which don't let that scare you. It's always going to be there because we're human. But we can work with it, and we can still hear it. We can still listen to our ego. It's just we don't have to act on what our ego is saying, because trying to just ignore it is trying to ignore, I don't even know what a good example is, but it's just going to come back 10 times harder.
Right. And I think to make a distinction too about that is we have the ego, which brake pedals kind of the things that maybe feel a little bit intense, or we're really going to jump into this thing with reckless abandon. To Ashley's point, I think the ego helps us stay safe to a certain degree. And then there's this concept that's kind of separate from that, which is just having ego strength, which for me, having the background that I do, just thinking about the chakra system, and the third chakra being the space of the ego, but in a capacity of I know who I am, that I am, this is me at my core. I know who I am. And so that discernment of when the wounded maybe ego comes online and it's we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. Don't do that. And then our ego strength gets to come in and say, we're okay. This is who we are. And we get to be who we are. We get to exist as we are, and we don't have to change that, right? We don't have to alter that. And so that is kind of sometimes where the inner conflict can come in, that we were talking about. And so we're talking about when we just say the ego, it's like, oh, we have to be shiny, we have to be likable, we have to have the things. And then the ego strength is I am, regardless of any of these outlying factors and any of the feedback, quote unquote, that we would get about doing it right.
And if you have listened to the 10 prior episodes, you know, one of the main common themes is like coming back to yourself. And that's truly it. Is sometimes the ego is the one that like has you kind of veering off, and the ego strength is like, that's the coming home, is the ego strength. And the more that we connect in with that, that's what we're referring to. So hopefully that helps maybe like organize this in your head a little bit, because I think it can get a little bit confusing.
Totally. And like the thing is like, there's a million different theoretical orientations. There's a million different books written about ego and you know, metaphysical conversations and spiritual conversations. Like you can get lost in all of these different schools of thoughts around these concepts of what lives where and how it presents. And at the end of the day, like Ashley said, it's when I come back home to myself, what do I know to be true? What is authentically me? What, and this comes from, you know, again, what we've talked about in lots of episodes of sensation, feeling it in our bodies, feeling like I can trust this voice. I can trust my voice.
You know what I do sometimes?
What? If you are not watching this, you should have seen her face light up. Either she was going to break into a Broadway song or she had. But it was sparkly.
Well, okay. Well, if it was Broadway, Hamilton.
Always.
Which one do you want? Because it is in this noggin every word. But I haven't done this exercise in a while, and so this is a good reminder. But it's very simple, but it can be super challenging depending on like where you're at, like headspace wise. But like she was just saying, like who you are, who am I? And so if you're curious, if you've never asked yourself that, get a sheet of paper out or write it in your phone or whatever, like who are you aside from the labels? So I think the roles. And the roles. And it's a way to like, again, this is just something that might be helpful to organize your thoughts of like, okay, are you a mom, sister, whatever? You don't get to write those down because that is a label. That's who you like present in the world to other people. But who are you aside from that, beneath all of that? Because who you are underneath all of that, that is like the solid human, sovereign, worthy being that you are. And use the sensations in your body to help guide you to those words that you want to write on the paper, and don't judge the words. It could just be soft, right? It could be
sensitive.
Yeah, it could be quirky. Like there's no judgment of the words, whatever word that comes up, even if you're unsure if it's even like a word that would describe you or like a descriptive word or anything like that. Like even if something random comes in, write it down and then give yourself some space and come back to it and be like, huh, okay. Like, yes, that's who I am. Right. Anyways, that just like came to me because I haven't done that episode. I haven't done that exercise in a while, but it's really challenging. Well, for me, it was really challenging the first time I did it because all I could write down was external things. Yeah. It was all external. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, that's who I am. And when you have to like talk about yourself.
Right. And
like,
we're taught that.
Yeah.
We're taught that. And that's exactly what we're talking about. I think from my imposter syndrome. Yeah. That's what came through in this is like, it has to be something that is embraced. It has to be something that like, it has to be a podcast. And what is a podcast? A podcast is something that people listen to. And it had to fit that form. When really at the inception of this entire thing, Ashley and I were like, we want a space for us to name these things, for us to have these conversations. That we were not trying to make a podcast per se. We were like, we want to have a space to have these conversations and create access to them. Yeah. And so for me, it was even coming back and saying, remove the fucking label. I almost censored it. I know. I almost censored myself. Who am I right now?
I already said that.
The label. remove the label of it being a podcast.
Yeah.
And come back to, are you speaking the things you want to be speaking? Are you talking about the things that matter? And that is literally what Ashley did to kind of like rein my ass in and be like, Sara, these things are important. We need to share them, and then it's funny how then, like, when I settle back into that and into my voice and into my own being, the feedback that I've gotten about what was for somebody when, like, it was really good for me to hear that today. It was what I needed. Or like those kind of, and that snaps me right back into, that's exactly why we're doing this. If one person hears it and they're like, that's me, or holy shit, that's what I was dealing with and I didn't realize it, or that's what's been sitting there and now I can take action on it, or just like, I feel seen.
Yeah.
Thank God somebody else feels that way. Like, if that is it, it is not, it is not for us to make something.
Yeah.
It is for us to be something in a space with others.
Yeah.
And it's been like,
ooh, I got goosebumps.
I love you. It's just for us to come into the space and have these conversations.
Yeah.
And I think, that was really good for me, because I don't, as a person. So like, when you were saying that, like, who are you? Like, as a person, like, one of the first things I thought was human. Like, I'm very human. I have very human emotions, and I still am fallible. I still fuck up. I still make mistakes. And I've been recently kind of entering into some old dynamics or old stories that have been coming in around me believing some low self-worth stuff.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of, when you were made that prompt, I was like, wow, like, actually low self-worth is not something I'm going to identify as a characteristic I have. I'm going to identify as an experience I have. But what is that experience? That experience is being human.
Yeah.
Is realizing I can make mistakes and I can repair it with the right people. But I'm also really warm and sensitive too, right? Like, human, just really kind of having the full range of emotions. And I've worked to get there, to have the full range of emotions. But that imposter's gonna come in, and I can't, the critic is gonna come in, but I'm not gonna identify it as someone who's self-criticizing. I'm not gonna identify as someone who's insecure. Those aren't gonna be labels I put on myself, but I can say, wow, sometimes I get scared.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry. Sometimes I have anxiety, right? And like, I can give myself permission to be in that human experience and not use it as a thing to shame.
And it's such a good, like, because you experience these things, because I experience the fear, because I experience the anxiety or the worry or the doubt, it doesn't make me that. Like, that is not who I am. It is just an experience I am having.
Yeah.
And that is so important to recognize. So important, because it's unrealistic. I mean, we've said this quite a bit. It's unrealistic to think that we're going to have a life where we don't experience these things.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. But we are not those things. It is just an experience. And yeah, that takes work. I mean, like, all of this is about like moving in and out of these things. And some days you crush it and you really can identify it as an experience and know that that's not who you are. And there are going to be days where you like sit down on the couch and you're like, I'm just insecure and scared.
Yeah.
Like, and that's who I am. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to happen.
Oh my, and I don't care how long we've been doing it. Like, how long you've been, I don't care how long I have been in therapy, and bless my therapist's heart for dealing with me for as long as she has. Man, she's really put in the work. But like, I don't care. We have gotten so far. We have made such incredible strides over the years that we have worked together. And this one conflict came in and it challenged everything I have built now this foundation on. And like, it challenged every relationship I have that I'm in right now. And I was like, how can that one little whisper from a historical experience come in and tell me something different? And so I have had to really go back towards my tools.
Yeah.
And go back towards the people, again, the people that are around me reflect to me who I am and where my values sit and what it is that I hold to be true about my heart and who and myself. And not let those things stall us or stop us, you know. And for me, and I'm an external processor, so like I had to reach towards friends. Like Ashley came in today and I was like, hey, can I just reach something? This just happened. And
you should have seen
her face and her middle finger. Not at me. It was not pointed at me.
I did that.
Yeah, it was so great. I loved it. Yeah. I mean, it was a very Lizzo moment. I just felt like that's how Lizzo would have handled it, you know? Yeah. She's just so like fiercely like love and like protector and like, you know, and so it was so good for me to have people that I respect deeply and honor me and who I honor in this whole process, you know, be it interpersonal relationships, be it us, you know, making this podcast. Like Ashley's just is somebody that I trust to say, where's ground again? Yeah. And Sara, what do you know about yourself? Right. Like to push me back towards that ego strength and like back towards that third chakra, which is like just such a fascinating space of like, I exist and I can be who I am. Yeah. And not let that be challenged. Yeah. Let it be, you know, come up against it. Yeah. But don't let it change 100%. What you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Sara's like talking about like safety around each other. And I think that I mentioned this a few episodes ago about how I just had like the like metal detector radar as you get closer to the metal, like beeps faster and faster. And as I was driving to Sara's house like a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, I don't know. Yeah, I got like, I could just feel it, man. I was like, I got in the car. I was like, I am good. We don't need to cry. Like we are on it today. Like I am so good. And then
my palms are sweating thinking about this moment.
So then I got on the interstate and I was like, I'm not so okay. But like, you know, I turned on Boss Ass Bitch. I turned on that song. And I was like,
I'm gonna override this.
Because I was like, I have to, like, I'm about to record podcast episodes. Like, I
gotta be good.
Come on. Like willing myself. And then I exited the freeway and I was like, wow. My eyes are like welling up and I like literally turned onto her street and I just was like lost it. And then I was like, okay, no. All right, that was good. We just need to let that out. But like, we'll pull up. She won't know the difference. And I put my foot on her step. And she opened the door with like the biggest smile. And everything. I couldn't even speak to her. I couldn't speak.
I was panicking. I mean, she was like tears. All you could get out was, I'm not okay. Yeah. And that was all she could get out. And I, of course, am like, what the hell happened? You know, like what happened? Oh my God. Like, but it was
a lot.
And like, finally, when we got through it and she could share her story, which I hope someday I would love to open that up to this space of just the feelings of safety and like being unsafe in the world. Yeah. Ashley had an encounter with an unsafe person. And so like, and just to see her be able like to sit there and feel witnessed and to feel acknowledged, right? And to feel safe enough for me to open the door and you be in that state.
And I realized though that I was trying to, I know why my body responded the way it did as I got closer to her, because I knew that that's what she was going to do. I've never had to question if I could show up authentically or not in front of her. But I was convincing myself that what I was feeling, one, wasn't true. And two, that like I was listening to some other voices that told me that it wasn't a big deal, or that I should just like not worry about it, or like that it, you know, just wasn't anything. And so I was like listening.
Change your experience.
Yeah.
That's
like
what the
I
voice is
was
saying.
like really trying to override like my worthiness of like showing that fear and like not being okay. And it's like, it's so wild how like we could have a million people tell us like, no, what you experienced was real.
Yep.
And that fucking sucks and that's scary. And like, I'm so sorry that you experienced that. And one person could say, get over it. And immediately I was changed. Immediately I was like, you're right. I have to get over this. Like, this isn't, no, I'm good. Like, I'm good. Everything is fine. You know?
Yeah. Like I don't get to have my experience.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think for so many of us, that override has come in as a necessary protector because our experiences weren't validated.
Right.
You know, that is some developmental trauma stuff of just like not allowing for emotions, number one, and number two, not having those emotions held.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that is, I think, such a perpetrator of then the self-criticism and the self-judgment, because it's like, if I was never taught to trust that my emotions were real and they were valid and they were warranted, that then as this adult who's trying to be in the world, am I really going to trust my voice? Am I really going to trust what I'm sharing?
And that's exactly like, I wasn't trusting
your intuition.
I was not trusting any of it. And even in the moment that like the thing was happening, I was trying to override myself of like, no, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And as the situation got closer and closer to me, I was like, no, it's still going to be okay. Even though I knew that it wasn't okay. And so I think that it's like the same thing when you are putting yourself out there, when you are sharing your truth. Had I just said, had I just sent Sara a text and been like, hey, I want to talk about this when I get there, I probably would still have some tears, but I wouldn't have like worked myself into this situation where there was so much fighting, so much internal fight going on, because I didn't want to like just let myself be fully seen. Like I was trying to fight so hard against that. And my body was like, actually, no, we know that Sarah's. So here it's going to come all up.
Yeah.
And it's so, you know, it's like so refreshing. And it's just such a good reminder that there are people who value your voice in its purest human form. And that is, if we can offer any gift into the world, I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I just, to come back to like, Ashley, like your lived experience, your emotional experience there, your sensational experience there was yours, and it was real and it was honest. And all I had to do in that moment, and all you had to do for me in that moment, was reorient back to what is it that you actually feel?
Yeah.
What is it that you actually, if you can come back to yourself, what is it that you actually would know to be true? Yeah. And for you, it was like, that's not fucking okay. And I was like, that is not okay. That whole experience that you just lived is not okay. And you needed protection, you needed safety, you needed better ramifications and whatever. Anyways, mine, I'm still mad about it. But mine is like, I had to come back to, you know, she had to bring me back to just like, what is it you want to say?
Yeah.
And what do you know about what you have to say, Sara? And why are you doing this? That was the big thing. It was like, why? And I was like, well, just so people have access to information.
Yeah.
And it just, it brings us back to such a place. And so, you know, this is a conversation as much about returning to ourselves as I really think it now in having this. Because when Ashley and I get on here, we really don't know how we're going to go. We know the topic and that's about it.
And that's it. And then we say like, should we go? Okay.
And then we fly. We don't have notes. There are no notes in this.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like really recognizing how much it is a conversation too about like having that returning home to self, and then also who is it, that is surrounding you. Even if it is one person, if it is a boss, if it is a mentor, if it is a partner, if it is a friend, if it is a parent, somebody who is that beacon for you, that's going to point you back towards yourself and say, hold on, you know who you are. So, having just kind of encouraging maybe that reflection of like, when you are with them, do you feel closer to yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you feel further away? Do you feel closer to your voice? Because I'm sure everybody could probably find one person who they laugh so easily with, or they cry easily with, or or they, or you're just like, wow, I just feel I don't have to ever explain myself. Those moments where you just kind of feel this like ease. Notice that, because that is likely a person that can become that support system for you. Because I couldn't, like I said, I would have stuck my head in the sand a long time ago without Ash. So thank God for her.
But here we are.
And to wrap up the imposter conversation, I think something Ashley said was really important in this, the point she made about roles and who we are, and having the feelings, but not being that. What I love that Ashley and I have been able to do regardless is have the fear, have the doubt, have the worry. And this is now episode 11. So like, have it, feel it, name it. I didn't hide from her and go, like, it took me a minute. I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, Ashley, I think what's really happening for me is I'm feeling like we are not, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Like I wasn't naming it. I wasn't acknowledging it. And I saw all these defense mechanisms and avoidance strategies come in because I wasn't fucking being honest. That like, wow, I'm feeling like, why are we doing this again? My fear is coming back, and that I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything that's worthy. And so giving yourself permission to be honest about it. Like, oh, this is what's happening. I'm feeling this way again. That's a feeling. That's a sensation. It's not necessarily the truth. And it's not what we have to believe.
And it's not who we are.
It's not who we are.
And I, in all of this, obviously this work is hard, and it just will take a lifetime.
It's a lifetime sentence.
But in these moments where we have like been able to name these things, or even if it's not right away, but then being able to like come back to like, oh yeah, like, okay, this is, like she just said, naming all of that. Like these are the moments then that you have to like step back and just be proud of yourself for even stepping into that, like into the naming and allowing yourself to find some resolve, if it's by yourself, if it's with you, or if it's with the people who you can do that with, like Sara Cate was talking about. Like, be proud of that. Be so fucking proud of that, because it is hard, and not everybody is doing this. Like, there's a lot of people out there who still refuse to like do this work, and so every step of the way, it might be harder than other times, but just always give yourself that, like, hey, you're doing a good job. Like, recognize that, because nobody's gonna give it to you. Like, you got to find it within yourself. Give yourself a hug.
Why did you just like almost become Jersey?
Is that what it sounded
Give
like?
yourself a hug. Is that Jersey or is that Boston?
No idea.
We don't know. We're not from there. No offense to anyone from Boston or New Jersey.
Boston. Maybe it's because I like the Red Sox.
That's probably, oh yeah. That's why. There it is. The Red Sox.
Okay.
All right. Well, we hope that your imposter is a little quieter after this episode. And if not, you're in good company, because ours sometimes aren't either. And find those people, find that person, find that thing that helps you return back to self.
Yeah.
Okay. Until next time.
See you next time.